The bell above my hardware store door chimed, and I looked up from the invoice I was reviewing to see the two people I swore I would never forgive walking toward my counter. My father, the man who once threw a wrench at my feet hard enough to crack concrete, was limping. My mother, who told me I was too pathetic to deserve breakfast, looked like she had aged a decade in 3 years. Their heads were down, their shoulders were slumped. And in that split second before they reached the counter, I knew with absolute certainty why they were here. They needed money. The same people who told me I would never amount to anything, who threw a wrench at my feet like I was garbage, were now standing in the middle of everything I had built, begging for help. But that moment, that decision I made when they stood there begging, that only makes sense when you understand the war I survived to get there. See, what I am about to tell you is not just my story. It is the story of every person who was ever told they were not enough by the very people who should have built them up. It is for everyone who looked around the dinner table and realized they were the only one not invited to belong. If that is you, if you have ever felt that crushing weight of being the family disappointment, then do me a favor right now. Hit that like button because you deserve to know you are not alone. Subscribe because this story has an ending they never saw coming, and drop a comment with just one word, survived or surviving, so I know you are out there fighting your own battle. Trust me, you are going to want to hear how this war ends. Now let me take you back to the day everything changed. The day I learned that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to walk away from everyone who is drowning you. It was a Saturday afternoon in late August, the kind of day where the heat seems to press down on you like a physical weight. The garage door was open, but it did not help. The air was thick and suffocating, smelling of motor oil, rust, and the acrid scent of metal that had been heated and cooled too many times. I was on my back underneath my 1998 Honda Civic, the car I had bought for $800 from a guy 3 towns over. The transmission was giving me hell again, slipping between second and third gear like it could not decide which one it wanted to be in. Sweat dripped into my eyes, stinging and blurring my vision, but I did not stop. I had learned a long time ago that if I wanted something fixed in this house, I had to do it myself. The wrench in my hand was old, the chrome plating worn down to bare metal in places where my fingers gripped it most often. It had been my grandfather's before he passed away when I was 12. He was the only person in this family who ever made me feel like I mattered, like my thoughts and dreams were worth listening to. After he died, I found his toolbox in the attic, covered in dust and forgotten. My father did not want it. He said tools were for men who actually knew how to use them, and he hired people for that sort of thing, so I took it. I taught myself everything from YouTube videos and library books. By the time I was 16, I could rebuild an engine. By 18, I could diagnose electrical problems that left professional mechanics scratching their heads. The bolt I was working on was seized, corroded from years of salt and moisture. I had already soaked it in penetrating oil twice, but it still would not budge. My arm was cramping from the awkward angle, and my knuckles were scraped raw from slipping off the bolt more times than I could count. Just one more turn, I whispered to myself. Just one more, and I can get this whole assembly off and replace it. The metal groaned as I applied pressure, and for a second I thought it might actually move. Then I heard them. Footsteps. 2 sets. One light and quick, clicking heels on the concrete driveway. The other heavier, boots with a deliberate swagger to them. I knew who it was before they even spoke. Chloe, my 20-year-old sister, and Brandon, her boyfriend of 3 years, who had basically moved into our house 6 months ago without ever officially being invited to stay. He just started sleeping over more and more until one day his clothes were in her closet and his toothbrush was in the bathroom, and nobody seemed to think that was strange except me. "Oh my God," Chloe's voice rang out, high-pitched and performative. She was always performing, always aware of her audience. Is she seriously still working on that piece of junk? "Babe, look at her. She is like completely covered in grease. It is so gross." I did not respond. I had learned that responding only encouraged them, gave them more ammunition. I focused on the bolt, willing it to move, willing them to go away. Brandon laughed, that particular laugh he saved for when he wanted everyone to know he found something pathetic. It was not a real laugh. It was a weapon. He crouched down so he could see under the car, his face appearing in my limited field of vision. His hair was gelled into that deliberately messy style that probably took him 20 minutes to perfect. He had a silver chain around his neck that he constantly fidgeted with, like he needed everyone to notice it. "Hey there, grease monkey," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. You know they invented these things called mechanics, right? People who actually know what they are doing? You could just pay them to fix your car instead of playing pretend under there. I tightened my grip on the wrench. My jaw clenched so hard I could feel my teeth grinding together. I focused on breathing slowly through my nose, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Count to 5. Do not engage. Do not give him the satisfaction. But then he kept talking. Oh wait, I forgot. You cannot afford a real mechanic because you spend all your money on these useless tools. What is it your dad always says? He looked up at Chloe, who giggled on cue. Oh yeah, he says you are trying to be something you are not. That you should focus on finding a man instead of trying to act like one. Something inside me snapped. Not in a loud, explosive way. More like a thread that had been fraying for years finally gave way. I slid out from under the car, my back scraping against the concrete floor. I stood up slowly, deliberately. I was 5'7", but rage made me feel taller. Brandon straightened up too, but he had to take a step back. He was not expecting me to actually respond. I looked him directly in the eyes and spoke in a voice that was calm, steady, and cold as ice. A smile is the cheapest thing you could put on that face, Maya. I think that is what you were about to say, right, Brandon? But here is the thing. I do not need your validation. I do not need your approval. And I definitely do not need your ignorant commentary on how I spend my time or my money. So here is my advice for you. Silence is the most valuable thing you could give this world right now. Do not pollute it with your meaningless words. The garage went dead silent. Chloe's mouth fell open, her perfectly glossed lips forming a little O of shock. Brandon's face turned red, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he could not quite spit out. For a moment, just a moment, I felt powerful. I felt heard. Then I heard the voice that had haunted my nightmares since childhood. What the hell did you just say? My father's voice boomed from the doorway, connecting the garage to the house. Robert Caldwell was a big man, 6'2", and built like someone who had worked construction for 30 years before moving into management. He had hands like slabs of meat and a voice that could shake windows. He stood there in his weekend uniform, cargo shorts and a polo shirt with his company logo on it, his face already turning that dangerous shade of red that meant someone was about to get hurt. Usually me. Chloe immediately switched modes, her voice becoming small and wounded. Daddy, she totally just attacked Brandon for no reason. We just came out to say hi, and she started being so mean and hostile. I swear we did not do anything. She pointed at me like I was something toxic she did not want to touch. She is always like this. Always angry, always trying to start drama. My father walked into the garage with heavy, purposeful steps. Each footfall echoed. Brandon moved aside quickly, sensing the shift in power dynamics. My father did not even look at him. His eyes were locked on me, and in them I saw something I had seen 1,000 times before. Disgust, disappointment, a complete lack of love. He looked at me the way someone might look at a stray dog that had wandered onto their property, something to be dealt with and removed. You, he said, his voice low and dangerous now, which was somehow worse than when he yelled. You think you can talk to guests in my house like that? You think you can disrespect people under my roof? His eyes scanned the garage, taking in my tools scattered across the workbench, the car parts organized in careful rows, the oil stains on the floor. This whole setup is a joke. You playing mechanic like you are going to make something of yourself. You are 22 years old and you are still living in my house, using my electricity, eating my food, and you have the audacity to be rude? I felt something crack inside my chest. It was not my first time hearing these words. It was not even the 100th time. But there is something about hearing the same message over and over again that eventually makes it seep into your bones. You start to believe it. You start to think maybe they are right. Maybe you are the problem. Maybe you are worthless. Dad. I started, but he cut me off with a sharp gesture. Do not dad me. You know what your problem is? You have always been difficult. Always had to do things your way. Your sister? He gestured to Chloe, who was now standing next to Brandon with her arm through his, looking like the perfect couple. She knows how to behave. She knows how to make this family proud. She brought home a good man. She is studying to be a nurse. She is going to make something of herself. And you? You are out here covered in filth, working on a car that is not even worth fixing, wasting your life on pipe dreams. The word, good man, echoed in my head. Brandon, a good man. The same Brandon who I had heard talking to his friends about women like they were objects to be rated and discarded. The same Brandon who had never held a job for more than 6 months. The same Brandon who borrowed money from Chloe constantly and never paid it back. That was a good man in my father's eyes. But me, someone who taught herself a valuable skill, who never asked them for money, who fixed things around the house without being asked, I was the failure. My mother appeared then, as if summoned by the tension. Eleanor Caldwell was the kind of woman who always looked put together, even on weekends. Her hair was dyed a light blonde, styled in that suburban mom way that required weekly salon visits. She wore yoga pants that had never seen the inside of a gym and a fitted top that showed off the figure she maintained through diet pills and obsessive calorie counting. She took one look at the scene and sighed dramatically. What now? Her voice was weary, annoyed, like we were all children throwing tantrums instead of her husband verbally abusing their daughter. She looked at me, and I saw the familiar contempt flash across her face. Oh, let me guess. Maya said something inappropriate again. Honey, can you please just try to be pleasant for once? Is that really so much to ask? I opened my mouth to defend myself, to explain what actually happened, but my father was already moving. He strode over to my workbench where I had my tools laid out. My grandfather's tools, the ones that meant more to me than anything else in this house. He grabbed the largest wrench, a heavy adjustable one that had to weigh at least 2 pounds. The metal caught the light filtering in through the garage door, gleaming dully. You want to act tough? You want to talk back? He hefted the wrench, testing its weight. You know what your problem is, Maya? You have never learned respect. You have never learned your place in this family. He looked at the wrench, then at me, then back at the wrench. I held my breath. For a second, I genuinely thought he might throw it at me. I had seen him throw things before, a remote control that shattered against the wall behind my head when I was 14, a plate that exploded into ceramic shards when I came home past curfew at 16, his own phone when I told him I did not want to go to the college he had picked out for me. But he did not throw it. He did something worse. He walked up to me, close enough that I could smell the coffee on his breath and the cologne he wore that cost more than my car was worth. He raised the wrench high above his head. Time seemed to slow down. I saw my mother in the background, arms crossed, not moving to stop him. I saw Chloe with her phone out, probably texting her friends about the drama. I saw Brandon smirking, enjoying the show. Then my father brought the wrench down with all his strength. Not at me. Right next to my foot. The concrete floor actually cracked where it hit. The sound was like a gunshot in the enclosed space. The impact sent vibrations up through my legs. Tiny chips of concrete sprayed across my sneakers. He left the wrench there, embedded slightly in the broken concrete, and leaned in close to my face. You will learn to shut your mouth, he hissed, and his voice was shaking with barely controlled violence. Or I will teach you how. Do you understand me? I stood frozen, staring at the wrench stuck in the broken concrete like Excalibur in stone, except this was not a symbol of power. It was a symbol of terror, of control, of everything that was wrong with this family. The message was clear. Next time, it might not miss. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then my mother broke the silence with words that somehow hurt more than the wrench. Do not waste your energy, Robert. She shook her head, looking at me with pure disdain. She is just jealous because Chloe has a real man and she has nothing. Look at her. She gestured at my grease-stained clothes, my scraped knuckles, my sweaty face. At least when she keeps her mouth shut, she looks less pathetic. Maybe if she spent more time on her appearance and less time pretending to be a mechanic, she could find someone too. But who would want this? Brandon laughed out loud at that. Chloe giggled and whispered something in his ear. They were enjoying this. My humiliation was their entertainment. My father pulled the wrench out of the concrete with a sharp tug and tossed it carelessly onto the workbench. It landed with a clatter, scattering my carefully organized sockets. Then he turned and walked back toward the house, waving his hand dismissively. Clean up this mess, he said without looking back. And stay out of sight for the rest of the day. We have guests coming over and I do not want them seeing you like this. My mother followed him, her heels clicking on the concrete. Chloe and Brandon lingered for a moment. Chloe looked at me with something that might have been pity if it were coming from anyone else, but from her it just looked like superiority. You really should apologize, she said sweetly. Brandon did not do anything wrong. You are just so sensitive all the time. Then, they left too, arms around each other, probably already laughing about the crazy sister. I stood there alone in the garage for a long time, staring at the crack in the concrete. The car was still broken. My knuckles were still bleeding. But something else was broken now too. something inside me that I had not realized was still holding on. I had spent my entire life trying to prove to these people that I was worth loving, that I was worth respecting, and it had gotten me nowhere. I looked at my grandfather's tools, the only things in this house that felt like they belonged to me, and I made a decision. Not right then, but the seed was planted. The seed that would grow into the biggest decision of my life. That night, dinner was tense in a different way. My father had cooled down, but the anger was still there, simmering just below the surface. We ate in silence. The only sounds were forks scraping on plates and the occasional cough. Chloe and Brandon sat across from me, and every so often I would catch them exchanging looks and suppressing smiles. My mother asked Chloe about her nursing program. Chloe talked animatedly about her classes, her clinical rotations, her plans for the future. My parents listened with rapt attention, asking questions, offering encouragement. It was like watching a family I was not part of. When my mother finally acknowledged my existence, it was to remind me that I had not done the dishes from the previous night. "You need to contribute more around here, Maya," she said, not even looking at me. "We are not running a hotel." I wanted to point out that I fixed the leaking sink in their bathroom last week, that I had rewired the garage door opener when it stopped working, that I mowed the lawn every weekend without being asked. But I said nothing. I just nodded and finished my meal in silence. After dinner, I retreated to my room, which was more like a converted storage space than an actual bedroom. It was small, barely big enough for a twin bed and a dresser. There was one window that looked out onto the neighbor's fence. The walls were thin enough that I could hear everything that happened in the house. I could hear Chloe and Brandon laughing in her room. I could hear my parents watching television downstairs. I could hear my father telling my mother about how embarrassing I was, about how he did not know what they did wrong with me, about how Chloe turned out so perfect and I turned out so broken. I lay on my bed and stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the plaster. There were 17. I had counted them 1,000 times. I thought about my grandfather. I wished he was still alive. He would have understood. He would have told me that working with my hands was not something to be ashamed of, that figuring out how things worked was a gift, not a deficiency. But he was gone, and I was alone in a house full of people who saw me as nothing more than an inconvenience. Sleep did not come easy that night. When it finally did, I dreamed of wrenches falling from the sky like rain, cracking the earth everywhere they landed. The next morning was Sunday. Normally, Sundays were quieter. My father would read the paper and watch sports. My mother would meal prep for the week. Chloe would sleep in until noon. But that Sunday felt different from the moment I woke up. There was a thickness to the air, a tension that made my skin prickle. I got dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, pulled my hair back into a ponytail, and went downstairs. The kitchen was already full. My father sat at the head of the table, newspaper spread out in front of him, reading glasses perched on his nose. My mother was at the stove, making scrambled eggs and bacon. The smell should have been comforting, but it just made my stomach turn. Chloe was at the table doing her makeup, using the reflection in her phone screen as a mirror. And Brandon was there, of course, sitting in the chair that used to be mine before he started joining every family meal. He had his feet propped up on another chair, scrolling through his phone, completely at ease in a home that was not his. I walked to the cabinet to get a plate. The cabinet door squeaked, and the sound seemed unnaturally loud. My father looked up from his paper, his eyes following me as I moved. I could feel his gaze like a physical weight. I reached for a plate, a simple white ceramic one, nothing special. Before I could take it down, his voice cut through the kitchen. "Do not even think about touching that food with that attitude." His voice was calm, controlled, but there was steel underneath. "Did you not cause enough trouble yesterday? Do you really think you deserve to sit at this table right now?" I froze, my hand still extended toward the plate. I turned to look at him. His face was impassive, but his eyes were cold. Chloe looked up from her makeup, interested now. Brandon set his phone down, sensing entertainment. My mother continued cooking, but her shoulders were tense. She was listening. I lowered my hand slowly. I looked at each of them. My father, who had just told me I could not eat breakfast in my own home. My mother, who said nothing to defend me. Chloe, who was already smiling, anticipating my humiliation. Brandon, the outsider who had more rights in this house than I did. Something clicked into place in my mind. It was not a sudden realization. It was more like the final piece of a puzzle I had been working on for years without knowing it. This was never going to get better. They were never going to change. I was never going to be good enough, loved enough, worthy enough. Not because of anything I did or did not do, but because they had decided a long time ago what role I played in this family. I was the scapegoat, the problem child, the one they could blame for everything that went wrong. I set the plate back in the cabinet with a soft click. Then I straightened up and looked my father directly in the eye. "Okay," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Then I will not be here anymore." The words hung in the air like smoke. My father's eyes widened slightly. My mother turned from the stove, spatula in hand. Chloe stopped mid-lipstick application. Brandon sat up straighter. "What did you just say?" My father's voice was low, dangerous. I took a breath. I repeated myself, slower this time. "Then, I will not be here anymore. I am leaving." The kitchen erupted. My father slammed his hand on the table, making the coffee cups jump. "You are not going anywhere. You are going to sit down, apologize to everyone at this table, and then you are going to go clean your disaster of a room." But I was already walking away, heading for the stairs. Chloe called after me, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Where are you going to go, Maya? Sleep on the street? You are useless. You cannot even take care of yourself. You will come crawling back by tonight." My mother added her voice to the chorus. "She will be back after one day when she realizes how good she has it here. This is just another one of her dramatic tantrums. She always does this." I climbed the stairs without responding. I heard Brandon say something that made Chloe laugh. I heard my father telling my mother to let me go, that I needed to learn the hard way. I went to my room and looked around at the few possessions I actually cared about. My grandfather's tools, some clothes, a few books, my laptop, my phone charger. I pulled out the duffel bag I used for overnight trips, the one I had bought at a thrift store for $5 3 years ago. I packed methodically. Underwear, socks, jeans, shirts, a jacket, my toiletries from the bathroom, my laptop and charger, the photo album my grandfather made for me before he died, full of pictures of him teaching me how to use tools, pictures of us fixing things together. That album was probably the most valuable thing I owned. Then I went back to the garage. The concrete was still cracked where my father had slammed the wrench down. I gathered my grandfather's tools carefully, wrapping them in an old towel so they would not bang against each other. The wrench he had used yesterday was still on the workbench. I picked it up, felt its weight, and added it to the bag. I walked back through the house one last time. They were still in the kitchen. I could hear them talking about me like I was already gone. My father saying I would not last a week. My mother agreeing. Chloe making some comment about how I was too proud for my own good. Brandon laughing. I walked past the kitchen doorway. My father looked up. For a second, our eyes met. I saw the challenge in his gaze, the certainty that I would fail, that I would come back broken and begging. I walked out the front door and closed it quietly behind me. I stood on the front porch for a moment, the morning sun already hot on my face. My duffel bag was heavy on my shoulder. I had $342 in my checking account. I had no plan, no place to go, nobody to call. But I had something more valuable than any of that. I had reached the end of my rope. I had finally had enough. And sometimes that is all you need. Not a plan, not money. Just the absolute certainty that anything at all, would be better than staying. I walked down the driveway and turned right, heading toward town. I did not look back. Not once. Behind me, the house that had never felt like a home stood silent and still. Ahead of me was nothing but uncertainty. And for the first time in my life, that uncertainty felt like freedom. I walked for hours that day. The morning turned to afternoon. The sun climbed high and beat down mercilessly. My shoulder ached from the weight of the duffel bag, but I kept walking. I did not have a destination in mind. I just knew I needed to move, to put distance between myself and that house. I walked through neighborhoods where people were mowing lawns and washing cars, living their normal Sunday lives. I walked past the high school I had graduated from 4 years ago. I walked past the park where my grandfather used to take me to feed the ducks when I was little. Eventually, I found myself on Market Street, the main commercial strip of our small town. Most of the shops were closed on Sundays, their windows dark and their doors locked. But there was a coffee shop open at the corner, and I went inside. The air conditioning hit me like a wall, and I realized I was drenched in sweat. I bought an iced coffee with some of my limited cash and sat in a corner booth, trying to figure out what to do next. I could stay in town, try to find a cheap motel room, look for a job. But I knew that news traveled fast here. Everyone knew everyone. Within a day, my parents would hear where I was. They might even try to drag me back, not because they wanted me, but because it would look bad if people knew their daughter ran away. I could leave town entirely, head to the city 2 hours north, try to start over somewhere completely new. But that felt too big, too scary. I had never been anywhere by myself before. I was spiraling, my thoughts chasing each other in useless circles, when I saw him. Mr. Henderson. He was across the street, sweeping the sidewalk in front of Henderson Hardware, the old tool and supply store that had been on Market Street for as long as I could remember. Mr. Henderson was one of those people who seemed like he had always been old. He had a round face, wire-rimmed glasses, and a habit of wearing flannel shirts even in summer. He had been friends with my grandfather. They used to go fishing together every other weekend. Without really thinking about it, I gathered my bag and my coffee and crossed the street. Mr. Henderson looked up as I approached, and his face broke into a warm smile. "Maya Caldwell," he said, leaning on his broom. "I have not seen you in ages. How is your grandfather's toolbox treating you?" The question was innocent, but it hit me like a punch to the gut. Suddenly, I was crying, not delicate tears that rolled down my cheeks. I was sobbing, big ugly sobs that shook my whole body. All the stress, all the fear, all the pain of the last 24 hours came pouring out of me in the middle of Market Street at 2 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. Mr. Henderson dropped his broom immediately and guided me inside the store. The interior was dim and cool, smelling of sawdust and metal and machine oil. It was a comforting smell, familiar in a way that made my heart ache. He sat me down on a stool behind the counter and handed me a box of tissues from a drawer. Then he waited. He did not ask me what was wrong. He did not tell me to calm down. He just waited until I could breathe again. When I finally got myself under control, the story came out in pieces. I told him about the garage, about Brandon and Chloe, about the wrench cracking the concrete, about my father telling me I could not eat breakfast, about walking out with everything I owned in a duffel bag. I told him I had nowhere to go and no idea what I was going to do. I told him I felt stupid and weak and lost. Mr. Henderson listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, cleaning his glasses on his shirt. Then he put them back on and looked at me with eyes that were kind but also serious. "Maya," he said, "your grandfather would have been proud of you for leaving. He knew what your family was like. He told me once that he worried about you, that he wished he could do more to protect you." The words hit me hard. I had always thought my grandfather's kindness was just who he was, that he did not realize how bad things were at home. But he had known. He had seen. And he had tried, in his own way, to give me the tools I needed to survive, literally and figuratively. Mr. Henderson continued, "I need help here at the store. Business has been picking up and I cannot keep up with everything by myself. The pay is not great, but it is honest work. $12 an hour, 40 hours a week. I can pay you in cash every Friday until we get you set up with proper paperwork. And there is a room upstairs. It used to be my office, but I do not use it anymore. It has a bathroom and a hot plate. You could stay there if you need to." I stared at him, not sure if I had heard correctly. "You are offering me a job and a place to live?" He nodded. "I am offering you a chance. What you do with it is up to you. But I knew your grandfather, and I know you. I have seen you fix things that professionals gave up on. You have got skill, Maya, real skill. And more than that, you have got heart. That is worth something. I do not think I have ever felt more grateful in my entire life." I started the next morning. Mr. Henderson showed me around the store, explaining the inventory system, teaching me how to use the cash register, introducing me to the regular customers who came in. The work was physical, stocking shelves and moving boxes and helping people load heavy items into their trucks, but it felt good. It felt purposeful. At the end of that first day, my body ached in a completely different way than it had in the garage. This ache felt earned. The room upstairs was small, smaller even than my room at my parents' house. It had a single window that looked out onto Market Street. There was a twin bed with a thin mattress, a small table with 2 chairs, a bathroom with a shower stall, and a counter with a hot plate and a mini fridge. It was not much, but it was mine. Completely mine. For the first time in my life, I lived in a space where nobody could barge in without knocking, where I did not have to hear their voices through the walls, where I could breathe without waiting for the next criticism or insult. That night, I made ramen on the hot plate and ate it sitting at the small table, looking out the window at the streetlights coming on. Cars drove by, people walked their dogs, the world kept turning, and I was still here. I had survived. The relief was so overwhelming I cried again, but these were different tears. These were not tears of pain or fear. They were tears of release. The first week was hard in ways I had not anticipated. My body adjusted to the physical work quickly enough, but my mind struggled. I kept expecting my phone to ring, expecting my parents to show up and demand I come home, expecting Chloe to send cruel text messages. But nothing came. The silence was deafening. Part of me had hoped that leaving would make them realize they had been wrong, that they would miss me, that they would apologize. But apparently, they had not even noticed I was gone. Or worse, they had noticed and did not care. On the third day, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "You are embarrassing this family with that dirty job. What will people think?" The words stung, but not as much as I expected them to. I read the message 3 times, my finger hovering over the reply button. Finally, I typed out a response. "They will think I am surviving. That is something you and Dad never taught me how to do." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I blocked her number. 30 seconds later, my phone buzzed again. "Chloe, you owe Dad money for the tools you broke." I did not even reply. I just blocked her too. Then I blocked my father. I blocked Brandon. I blocked all of them. The silence that followed was not lonely. It was peaceful. Mr. Henderson was patient with me, teaching me not just about the work but about running a business. He showed me how to track inventory, how to read supplier catalogs, how to negotiate better prices. He taught me about profit margins and overhead costs. In the evenings, after we closed the store, he would sometimes stay and show me advanced skills, how to cut glass, how to thread pipe, how to mix custom paint colors. He treated me like a student worth investing in, not like a burden or a disappointment. 3 months in, he started teaching me about the books. He showed me the accounting software, explained how to process invoices and track expenses. One night, sitting in the small office area with spreadsheets open on the computer, he turned to me and said something I will never forget. "Maya, I am getting old. My kids do not want this place. They moved to the city, got their fancy corporate jobs. They think this store is beneath them. But this store has been my life. I have spent 40 years building it, and I do not want it to die when I retire." I looked at him, confused about where this was going. He continued, "I have been watching you these past few months. You have got something most people do not have. You care about doing things right. You care about the customers. You understand what it means to build something with your hands. And I think, with the right guidance, you could run this place better than I ever did." "Are you saying I started, but I could not even finish the sentence?" He smiled. "I am saying I want you to think about buying me out. Not right away. I am not ready to retire just yet. But in a year or two, when you have saved up enough for a down payment, we can work out a payment plan. You can take over Henderson Hardware. Make it your own." The idea seemed impossible. I was 22 years old with $300 in the bank when I started. How could I possibly buy a business? But Mr. Henderson saw the doubt on my face and shook his head. "Stop thinking about all the reasons why you cannot. Start thinking about how you can. That is what your grandfather would tell you." So I did. I started saving every penny I could. I worked 6 days a week, sometimes 7. I took on side jobs, fixing things for people in town. Word got around that I was good with repairs, and soon I had a steady stream of customers asking me to fix their lawnmowers, their appliances, their cars. I charged reasonable rates, built a reputation for quality work, and saved everything I made. I moved out of the room above the store after 6 months and rented a tiny studio apartment 2 blocks away. It was not much bigger, but it had a real kitchen and a window that got morning sunlight. I bought a used couch from the thrift store and a coffee table someone was throwing away. I learned to cook real meals instead of living on ramen and canned soup. Slowly, piece by piece, I built a life that felt like mine. During this time, my phone stayed silent. No calls from home. No texts. It was like I had never existed to them at all. Sometimes, late at night, I would wonder if they ever talked about me, if they ever regretted how they treated me, if Chloe ever missed having a sister. But those thoughts never lasted long. I was too busy building something real to waste time mourning a family that had never really been mine. A year and a half after I left, Mr. Henderson called me into his office after closing time. He had papers spread across the desk and a lawyer sitting in one of the chairs. "Maya," he said, his voice serious but warm, "I have been thinking about this for months now, and I have made my decision. I am ready to retire. My wife wants to travel while we still can. And I want you to take over the store." We worked out the details over the next 3 hours. The lawyer explained everything in terms I could understand. Mr. Henderson was selling me the business for $200,000, which was well below market value. He said it was because he knew I would take care of it, that I would honor what he had built. The down payment was $30,000. I had $28,000 saved. I sat there staring at the contract, so close to my dream but still $2,000 short. Mr. Henderson saw my face fall and he smiled. He slid an envelope across the desk. Inside was a check for $2,000. Consider it a loan, he said. Pay me back whenever you can. No interest. I could not speak. I just nodded and signed the papers with hands that shook so badly I could barely write my name. The next few months were a whirlwind. The store officially became mine on a Monday morning in October. Henderson Hardware was now Caldwell Hardware, though I kept the old sign because it felt wrong to erase Mr. Henderson's legacy completely. I just added a small plaque underneath that read, "Under new management, Maya Caldwell, owner." That plaque meant more to me than any diploma or award ever could. I threw myself into the work with everything I had. I expanded the inventory, bringing in tools and supplies that I knew people needed but that Mr. Henderson had never carried. I started offering repair services officially, advertising in the local paper and on social media. I taught weekend workshops on basic home repair, charging a small fee that always sold out. Women especially came to these workshops, tired of feeling helpless when something broke in their homes, tired of being dismissed by male contractors who talked down to them. I knew exactly how that felt. The business grew faster than I had imagined possible. Within 6 months, I had paid back Mr. Henderson's $2,000 loan. Within a year, I had hired 2 part-time employees to help with the weekend rush. I negotiated better deals with suppliers, implemented an online ordering system, and started a loyalty program for regular customers. The store went from barely breaking even under Mr. Henderson to turning a solid profit every month. I moved again, this time into a real 1-bedroom apartment with a dishwasher and a parking space. I bought a newer car, nothing fancy, just a reliable Toyota that did not break down every other week. I opened a savings account and started contributing to a retirement fund. These things might sound small, but to me they were monumental. They were proof that I could take care of myself, that I could build something stable and lasting. But success has a funny way of attracting attention, even from people who wanted nothing to do with you when you had nothing. It was a Tuesday afternoon, almost 2 years to the day since I had walked out of my parents' house. The store was busy with the usual afternoon crowd. I was helping a customer choose the right drill bits when I saw them through the front window. My parents. They were getting out of their old pickup truck, the same one my father had been driving for 15 years. It looked even more beat up than I remembered, rust eating through the wheel wells, one headlight held in place with duct tape. My stomach dropped. My first instinct was to hide, to run out the back door and avoid the confrontation entirely. But this was my store, my business, my territory. I was not going to run anymore. I finished helping my customer, took his payment, thanked him for his business, and watched him leave. Then I turned to face the door just as my parents walked in. They looked older. My father's hair had gone almost completely gray, and he had developed a noticeable limp. My mother's face was more lined, her makeup unable to hide the deep creases around her mouth and eyes. They both looked tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. They looked worn down by life. They saw me behind the counter and stopped. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Customers browsed the aisles, unaware of the tension. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "Maya," he said, and his voice lacked the authority it used to have. It sounded uncertain, almost fragile. "We need to talk." I kept my face neutral, my voice professional. "This is a place of business. If you need to purchase something, I am happy to help you. If you are here for another reason, I am afraid I am too busy right now." My mother stepped forward, and I saw something in her eyes I had never seen before. It might have been desperation. "We heard you own this place now," she said. "We just wanted to see it. See how you are doing." "I am doing very well," I replied coolly. "Was there something specific you needed?" The words hung between us, sharp and cold. My father looked around the store, taking in the organized shelves, the clean floors, the customers who were clearly comfortable and happy to be there. His expression was complicated, a mix of surprise and something else. Regret, maybe. Or resentment that I had succeeded despite his predictions. "The thing is," he started, then stopped. He looked at my mother, who gave him a small nod of encouragement. "We have been having some financial difficulties. The plant cut hours back. My pension got frozen because of some corporate restructuring." And the truck needs major repairs that we cannot afford right now. He paused, and I could see how much it cost him to say the next words. We were hoping you might be able to help us out, just a loan. We will pay you back as soon as things stabilize. There it was, the real reason for their visit. Not to apologize, not to make amends. They needed money. I let the silence stretch out, watching them squirm. Finally, I spoke. Where is Chloe? Why is she not helping you? My mother's face tightened. Chloe has her own expenses. She and Brandon are engaged now, planning a wedding. She is still in nursing school. She cannot afford to help us right now. I nodded slowly. So let me make sure I understand this correctly. For 22 years, you told me I was worthless. You told me I would never amount to anything. You threw tools at me. You denied me food in my own home. You made me feel like I was nothing more than a burden and an embarrassment. I paused, letting each word land. And now, after 2 years of complete silence, you show up here asking for money? My father's face started to turn red. Now you listen here. We gave you a home. We fed you. We clothed you. After everything we did for you, this is how you repay us? I felt a laugh building in my chest, cold and bitter. You did the bare minimum required by law to keep from being arrested for child neglect. That is not the same as being good parents. That is not the same as loving your child. A customer nearby glanced over, sensing the tension. I lowered my voice, maintaining professional composure even as my heart pounded. I looked at my mother. You told me I was pathetic. You told me to shut up so I would look less ugly. You stood by while Dad terrorized me and did nothing to stop it. Then I looked at my father. You threw a wrench at my feet hard enough to crack concrete. You told me to learn my place. You said I would never make anything of myself. I gestured around the store. This place you said was beneath me? I own it. Every shelf, every tool, every square inch. I bought it with money I earned through the skills you mocked me for having. I built a successful business while you told me I was building nothing but failure. My voice was steady, calm, but there was steel underneath. So no, I will not be lending you money. I will not be helping you. Because you never helped me when I needed it most. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Maya, please. We made mistakes. We were too hard on you sometimes. But we are family. Family helps each other. The tears did not move me. I had cried too many tears alone in that garage, in that tiny room above the store, in my car, when the weight of everything became too much. Those tears had been real. These were manipulation. You are right, I said quietly. Family does help each other. But you stopped being my family the day you chose Chloe and Brandon over me. The day you chose cruelty over compassion. The day you made it clear that I was not worth your love or respect. I have built a new family now. People who see my value. People who encouraged me instead of tearing me down. You are not part of that family. My father's face went from red to purple. After all we did for you, this is the thanks we get? You ungrateful little brat. Some of the warmth drained from my voice, replaced by ice. I learned from the best, did I not? You taught me to prioritize myself. You taught me that blood does not guarantee loyalty. You taught me that some people do not deserve a place in your life, no matter who they are. I took those lessons to heart. They stood there, clearly not expecting this version of me. The Maya they knew was quiet, obedient, desperately seeking their approval. This Maya was a stranger to them. Good, I thought. Let them see what I became without them. My mother tried once more, her voice breaking. Please, Maya, we are desperate. We do not know what else to do. The plant might lay off more workers. If we lose the house, we will have nowhere to go. Something in me softened. Just a fraction. Not because I forgave them, but because I realized something important. Their suffering did not bring me joy. I did not want revenge. I did not want them to hurt. I just wanted them to understand what they had done. I wanted them to feel, even for a moment, what it was like to need someone and be turned away. I walked away from the counter and went to the tool section. I found what I was looking for on the third shelf, a wrench, heavy, adjustable, gleaming chrome. The same kind my father had slammed into the concrete that day. I walked back and placed it on the counter between us. Take this, I said. My father looked at it, confused. What? I kept my voice level. Take it. It is yours, free of charge. Maybe it will remind you what it feels like to build something instead of destroying it. My mother reached for her purse. How much do we owe you? Nothing, I repeated. It is a gift. The only one you will get from me. My father stared at the wrench like it was a snake that might bite him. He knew exactly what it symbolized. He knew I was throwing his own violence back in his face, not with anger but with cold, calculated precision. Slowly, his hand reached out and picked it up. The weight of it seemed to surprise him, as if he had forgotten how heavy it was, how much damage it could do. "Thank you," he mumbled, the words barely audible. They turned to leave. My mother paused at the door and looked back at me one last time. I saw the question in her eyes, the desperate hope that this might be a first step toward reconciliation. But I had nothing left to give them. I turned away and called out to a customer who needed help, dismissing my parents as easily as they had dismissed me for 22 years. I watched through the window as they got into their truck. My father sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at the wrench in his hands. My mother said something to him that I could not hear. Then they drove away, and I felt absolutely nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, no lingering anger, just a vast, peaceful emptiness where they used to live in my mind. The rest of that day passed in a blur. I helped customers, restocked shelves, processed orders, but my mind was elsewhere, processing what had just happened. When I finally closed up that evening, I sat in my car in the parking lot and let myself feel everything I had been holding back. The confrontation had taken more out of me than I wanted to admit. I drove home and made myself dinner. A real dinner, chicken and vegetables and rice. I ate slowly, tasting every bite, thinking about how far I had come. 2 years ago I was eating ramen in a room above a hardware store, wondering if I had made a terrible mistake. Now I owned that store. I had a home, a business, a future. I had proved every single one of them wrong. But more than that, I had proved something to myself. I was not the worthless, pathetic failure they had made me believe I was. I was capable. I was strong. I was worthy of respect and love and success. I did not need their validation because I had learned to validate myself. 3 days after my parents' visit, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Chloe. "I know Mom and Dad came to see you. I know you turned them down. Just so you know, they are telling everyone you are heartless and cruel, that you refuse to help them out of pure spite. They are playing the victim card, making themselves look like suffering parents with an ungrateful daughter." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond, to defend myself, to set the record straight, but I realized something important. It did not matter what they told people. The people who mattered, the people who knew me, knew the truth. And the people who believed my parents' version without asking for mine were not people whose opinions I valued anyway. I blocked Chloe's number and went back to work. Weeks turned into months. The store continued to thrive. I started getting calls from other small business owners, asking for advice on how I turned the place around so quickly. I became something of a local success story. The young woman who took over a struggling hardware store and made it profitable. The local newspaper did a feature on me. A regional business magazine included me in their 30 under 30 list of successful young entrepreneurs. With success came opportunities. A larger chain offered to buy me out for 3 times what I paid Mr. Henderson. I turned them down without hesitation. This was not just about money. This was about proving that I could build something lasting, something meaningful, something that was entirely mine. I expanded again, taking over the empty storefront next door and breaking through the wall to create a much larger space. I added a garden center and a small cafe where customers could get coffee while they shopped. I hired more employees, including 2 young women from difficult home situations. I saw myself in them and wanted to give them the same chance Mr. Henderson gave me. Life was good. Genuinely, peacefully good. I woke up every morning excited to go to work. I went to bed every night proud of what I had accomplished. I started dating casually, nothing serious, but it was nice to spend time with people who saw me as valuable and interesting. I took a weekend trip to the beach, the first real vacation I had ever taken. I stood in the ocean and let the waves wash over me and felt something I had never felt before. Complete, total freedom. But life has a way of coming full circle, and the past is never quite as buried as we think it is. It was a cold afternoon in late November, almost 3 years since I had left home. The store was quiet, most people saving their shopping for Black Friday sales the following week. I was in the back office, reviewing supplier contracts when one of my employees knocked on the door. "Maya," she said hesitantly, "there are some people here to see you. They say it is important." I walked out to the front and my breath caught in my throat. My entire family was there. My father, my mother, Chloe, and even Brandon. They looked like they had been through hell. My father was in a wheelchair, his leg in a cast. My mother was thinner than I had ever seen her, almost gaunt. Chloe looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Even Brandon looked diminished somehow, his cocky confidence replaced by something that looked like defeat. They all stared at me. I stared back. Finally, my mother spoke, and her voice was so small I almost did not recognize it. "Maya, we need your help. Real help this time. Things have gotten really bad. My father had an accident at work. He is on disability now, but it barely covers anything. Chloe had to drop out of nursing school because we could not afford it anymore. She and Brandon broke up. We might lose the house in a few weeks if we cannot make the mortgage payment." The words tumbled out faster and faster, a desperate stream of consciousness. "We have no one else to turn to. We know we treated you badly. We know we were wrong. We are sorry. We are so sorry. Please, Maya, we need you." I stood there behind my counter, in my store, surrounded by everything I had built from nothing. I looked at each of them in turn. My father, who had once thrown a wrench at my feet, now broken and helpless in a wheelchair. My mother, who had called me pathetic, now looking more pathetic than I ever had. Chloe, who had mocked me for being covered in grease, now looking like she had not slept in days. Brandon, who had called me a failure, now standing in the business I had built, forced to witness my success. This was the moment I had imagined 1,000 times. The moment they would come crawling back, and I would get to reject them the way they had rejected me. I had played out different versions of this confrontation in my head, each one more satisfying than the last. But now that it was actually happening, I felt nothing like I thought I would. There was no satisfaction, no triumph, just a deep, bone-weary tiredness. "How much do you need?" I asked quietly. My mother's eyes widened with hope. "The mortgage payment is $3,500, and we need money for food and utilities and gas, and..." I held up a hand to stop her. "I will pay the mortgage. Once. This one time. But there are conditions." They nodded eagerly, desperately. "Anything," my father said. "Anything you want." I walked back to the office and wrote out a check for $3,500. My hands were steady as I signed my name. I walked back out and handed the check to my mother. "Here are my conditions. You never contact me again unless I reach out first. You do not tell anyone I gave you this money. You do not come to my store or my home. You leave me alone to live my life in peace. Do you understand?" They nodded, stunned. My mother clutched the check like it was a life raft. "But Maya," she started. I cut her off. "Those are my conditions. Take them or leave them." Of course they did. They had no other choice. As they turned to leave, I called out one more time. "And one more thing. I want you to know that I am not doing this because I forgive you. I am not doing this because we are family. I am doing this because I am not you. I am not cruel. I am not petty. I am not someone who watches people suffer when I have the power to help, even if those people hurt me. But this is the last time. Do not ever come back." My father looked at me with something that might have been respect or might have been shame. "Thank you," he whispered. They left, and I locked the door behind them even though it was still an hour before closing time. I sat down on the floor behind the counter and let myself cry. Not for them, not for what we could have been, but for the little girl I used to be, who wanted so desperately to be loved by people who did not know how to love her. After a while, the tears stopped. I stood up, washed my face in the bathroom, and went back to work. There were invoices to process and inventory to check. Life went on, because that is what life does. It keeps going whether you are ready or not. That night, I went home and made dinner. I poured myself a glass of wine, something I had learned to appreciate. I sat on my couch in my apartment and looked around at the life I had built. It was not perfect. It was not glamorous. But it was mine, earned through hard work and determination, and refusing to believe the lies they told me about myself. I thought about my grandfather and wished he could see me now. I thought about Mr. Henderson and made a mental note to call him tomorrow and tell him about the expansion plans I was considering. I thought about the 2 young women I had hired, and how one of them had told me last week that working for me had changed her life, that I had given her hope when she had none. That is when I realized something important. The revenge I had dreamed about, the dramatic confrontation where I rejected them completely, would have felt good in the moment, but it would have made me like them. It would have meant that their cruelty had infected me, changed me into someone who took pleasure in others' pain. By helping them this once, By setting boundaries but not closing the door with cruelty, I had proved something crucial. I had broken the cycle. I was not going to perpetuate their patterns. I was going to be better. The silence in my apartment that night was not empty. It was full of possibility, full of peace, full of the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you have survived the worst and come out stronger. The wrench my father threw at me all those years ago was meant to break me, to keep me afraid and small. Instead, it became the foundation of everything I built. Every tool in my store was a reminder that destruction and creation use the same instruments. The difference is in the hands that hold them and the intention behind the action. So, let me ask you this. Have you ever had to choose yourself over people who were supposed to love you? Have you ever walked away from toxicity even when everyone told you that you should stay because they are family? What would you do if you were in my position, when your parents came asking for help after years of cruelty? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if it gave you hope or made you feel less alone in your own struggle, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they deserve better. Sometimes the family you build is stronger than the family you are born into. Sometimes the only way to find yourself is to leave behind everyone who convinced you that you were not worth finding.